He is known as a 1950s B-movie icon, appearing in a string of science fiction and horror films that are still remembered today. However, he went through a lot before making those memorable films. He was from a Chicago family who owned a successful meatpacking business. While serving in the military, he married one of America's most beloved former child stars. Soon after, he began an acting career of his own. It seemed as if everything was falling perfectly into place. He had a beautiful wife and then a daughter, and was appearing in John Ford films with John Wayne. Then everything came crashing down. The public image of a fairy tale marriage was shattered with a highly publicized divorce, and that was followed by a string of legal issues which resulted in a couple of stints in prison. But through it all, he kept on working. While he never became a major Hollywood star, he did carve out a very successful career in B films, many becoming cult classics that continue to find audiences to this day. He was born John George Agar Jr. on January 31, 1921 in Chicago, Illinois. His parents were John George Sr. and Lillian Agar. His dad ran the family meatpacking business, the Agar Packing and Provision Corporation, started by his great-grandfather sometime before the Civil War, and Mom was a former Broadway actress. He was the eldest of 4 children, having a sister Joyce and 2 brothers, James and Frank. He grew up in a pretty affluent atmosphere, in a fine home with all its advantages. Yet John didn't necessarily have a free ride. His parents required the boy to work for his spending money. One of his first jobs for the family was pig herding. He was paid $3 a week for getting up at 4 a.m. and helping several older men escort 300 or 400 pigs through the streets of Chicago to loading pens at the slaughterhouse. It was nothing like servicing a newspaper route, John said. Some of those animals would weigh several hundred pounds and they didn't want to be shoved around. After grammar school, he attended the Harvard School for Boys in Chicago, Illinois, and then was shipped off to the Prauling Prep School in Prauling, New York. He did well in his studies. He also fared well in sports such as football and basketball. As soon as Agar's son John finished school, he joined the business and worked with his father to help build a prosperous meat business. On June 22, 1936, on the day the family was moving to Lake Forest, Illinois, his father died suddenly of a heart attack at the young age of 41. John might have gone to college to become a professional man, but that changed when World War II began. John was drafted into the Air Force. Although it has been reported that he was a war hero, the truth was, John never left the States in the 3 years he served. He was part of the U.S. Navy Air Corps and did his basic training in Texas. At the same time, his mother with the other children moved to California and she opened a clothing boutique in Beverly Hills. Shirley Temple began her film career in 1931 when she was 3 years old. It was in films like Bright Eyes and Little Miss Marker in 1934 and Curly Top and the Littlest Rebel in 1935 that made her one of the most popular actresses in Hollywood. The Child was the #1 box office draw from 1934 to 1938. John Agar's mother was friends with Zazu Pitts, the Hollywood film star who had been acting in film since the silent days. Zazu lived next door to Shirley Temple. One day John and his mother were visiting her when Shirley came over. She was 15 and John was 22 when they met. I considered her a little girl when I first met her. Then she and my kid sister went to the same girls' school in Westlake. I had been in the Navy Air Corps at the time and I received a medical discharge. Then when I straightened out, I went into the Army Air Corps. I'd come home on furlough and Shirley and I would go out on dates, and eventually we fell in love. Shirley plans wedding to Sergeant. Although she thinks 17 is too young for most girls to marry, Shirley Temple was busy today completing details of her marriage to Sergeant John George Agar on September 19th. Agar, 24-year-old Army Air Force physical instructor soon to be discharged, and the newly grown-up screen glamour girl met 2 years ago at a swimming party. Jack, with a prep school background, said he had no post-war business plans, certainly no idea of a screen career. He is the son of Mrs. Lillian Agar and the late John Agar of Lake Forest, Illinois. She married the Army Air Force's sergeant last night in a wedding marked by one of the biggest mob scenes in Hollywood history. The former film Moppet had wanted a quiet church ceremony, but her fans thought differently. They started gathering at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in front of the Wilshire Methodist Church. By wedding time, 8:30, a crowd estimated by police at 5,000 lined the streets. Traffic down Wilshire Boulevard, main highway through Los Angeles, was hopelessly snarled. 45 city, studio, and military policemen attempted to hold the crowd back, but they were not enough. When the bride and bridegroom left the church, a shouting throng of adolescents, middle-aged women and men nearly swamped them. A police lieutenant finally ordered an aisle through the crowd, and the couple, surrounded by 8 guards, made their way into a waiting car. To the public, it was a fairy tale marriage. The young, beautiful star, in which the whole world had watched grown up in film houses, taking for her husband the handsome and athletic army officer. And from all reports at the time, it seemed like the perfect union. John always claimed that he had no interest in an acting career when they got married, but suddenly changed his mind. The way I got into films was, I was home on furlough and I went to a party where David O. Selznick was a guest. We met and he asked me what I planned to do when I got out of the service, and I told him I didn't know. I hadn't thought about it. He said, "Have you ever considered acting?" I said, "I've never even been in the school play." He said, "Well, I'd like to give you a screen test. If you have any ability, I'll teach you and pay you $150 a week. Heck, I was making $83 a month in the service." I said, "What the hey, I'll give it a shot," he laughed. I was scared for the first 25 years I was in the business. I went to the studio and did a screen test, Agar remembered. It was a scene from The Farmer's Daughter, the picture Loretta Young did. I did the scene and I was scared to death. I don't know what Selznick saw on that test. I saw it later and thought it was just terrible. I couldn't bear to look at it. Agar would insist all his life that before he met Selznick, he had no thought of becoming an actor. But I will jump ahead a little to an article Hedda Hopper wrote in 1950. John Agar is making his singing debut here at the Elks Lodge. Has he forgotten he sang at the Buttery in Chicago long before he met Shirley Temple? And I recently learned that he had tried to get into pictures both at Warner and RKO in 1941. Wonder who's fooling whom. Shirley Temple borrowed for top role in Warner's film Mary Hagan. The film, That Hagan Girl with Ronald Reagan, was at the time where Shirley was trying to make that difficult transition into more adult roles. But unfortunately, the film didn't do well. The New York Times wrote, "But it's poor put upon Shirley, who looks most ridiculous through it all. She acts with the moppous dejection of a school child who's just been robbed of a 2-scoop ice cream cone. And when she performs, in the school play, some scenes from Romeo and Juliet, well..." With John taking acting lessons, and some already considering Shirley a has-been, along with the publicity their marriage was getting, the idea of them doing a film together seemed like a great idea. So they both appeared as sweethearts in the 1948 film Fort Apache. I was petrified there for a while. That was my first picture. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. I was working with all these old-timers that I loved and admired, the Ford Stock Company they were called, and I couldn't believe how gracious they were. They were like a family, and I wouldn't have made it without them. Ford, I always thought he was a big pussycat. He just put on that tough demeanor. He got after me one time, but I just laughed it off.
What's that over there?
Blue Mesa.
Can't we go there?
Well, it's not as close as it appears, Miss Thursday.
Are you anxious to return to the fort, Lieutenant?
Oh, no, Miss Thursday.
3 of Agar's first films were with John Wayne. Fort Apache, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, and The Sands of Iwo Jima. And during that time, Shirley found out she was pregnant. Family portrait. Shirley Temple, now 18, and her husband John Agar, 26, posed recently for this family portrait. The young actress, who announced they expect a baby in January, says she wants to work as long as possible. The couple is currently working in the same film. They were married in 1945. 7-pound daughter born to Shirley Temple. The baby missed by only 1 day, arriving the same day of the month as Agar. He was born January 31st, 1921. Miss Temple and Agar live in a genuine dollhouse and will take the baby home there. It is the same cottage where she played house with 1,500 dolls sent to her as the world's richest child star from fans all over the world. When she and Agar were married, they added a room or two to the full-size place and moved in. Her parents live in the big house on the other side of the Brentwood estate. The public loved the young couple. When they arrived in Chicago for the premiere of Fort Apache, they were mobbed by 1,500 fans. Well, John and Shirley are very cute too in Fort Apache. John told me he calls the baby Susie because he thinks Linda is too formal. Actually, John and I don't have much to quarrel about. I suppose the old 2 careers in 1 family is a bugaboo to some people, but it's worked out wonderfully for us, particularly since we are playing opposite each other in the same picture. Shirley Temple named U.S. Sweetest's mother. John Agar is now taking private singing lessons. Of course, I'm more at ease in love scenes with Jack. I'm kinda new at movie lovemaking, but don't let old-timers kid you either with talk about romantic scenes just being part of the job. If an actor and actress love each other, it shows on the screen. If they hate each other, that shows up even more. The public followed every move the couple made. They were America's sweethearts, a storybook marriage, the perfect union. The adorable actress they had watched grow up from a dimpled-faced cutie into a gorgeous woman, and the handsome soldier turned actor. However, that all changed in October of 1949. Shirley Temple divorces Agar. They said Shirley was fed up with Agar's casual attitude towards family life. "I'm so confused and unhappy," the curly-haired actress said, gulping down a sob. "I don't know whether it's Jack's fault or mine. All I know is there's no possible chance for a reconciliation. I'd like to keep this as dignified and quiet as possible," she said. But it all isn't Jack's fault. Shirley had everything her own way all her life, and it was hard for Jack to make a place in a setup like that. Agar moved out of Shirley's home last night and went home to Mother. "He's very unhappy," Mrs. John Agar Sr. said. "He won't talk about it. I had no idea this was coming. I always kept out of their private affairs." The world was shocked. Shirley told stories of older ladies giving her a headshake of disapproval when they saw her. "They wrote me bags full of letters deploring the end of the marriage," American gossip columnist Elsa Maxwell said. "Girls waited at stage doors of theaters where I spoke, sometimes red-eyed. They'd all say the same thing. 'Tell me why Shirley did that. We can't bear it.'" Shirley Temple divorced John Agar today, testifying that her marriage to the handsome actor was turbulent. She accused him of paying too much attention to other women and drinking too much. Courtroom spectators gasped when the one-time child star testified that Agar's conduct once forced her to leave the house and considered driving off a cliff. She said that when she was 5 months pregnant, Agar brought home another woman into her bedroom and urged her to go out to a party. Frequently, she said, he left her alone in nightclubs while he danced with other women and kissed them. "One night John came home, drunk again, very belligerent, and called me names," she continued. "After dinner, I jumped in my car. I was going to drive off a cliff or something, but instead I drove to a doctor. I'm sorry that Cheryl and I couldn't see eye to eye," he said after she filed her suit, "but I won't contest the divorce." Agar answers Shirley, says Truth Hidden. Actor John Agar believes Shirley Temple's divorce court story did not give a true picture of their real differences. Miss Temple won a divorce decree in Los Angeles yesterday. Agar, who is in Buffalo, says, "As usual, there are 2 sides to the controversy. There is much," he says, "that I might have said and I might say now." But he said he will keep silent because, in his words, "This is the course I have followed since our separation, and I want to follow it despite possible wrongful implications which might result from what she said in court." From what has been reported over the years in both newspapers and books about Shirley's life, it is easy to put the total blame on Agar. And maybe he deserves most of it, but in most of these situations, there are usually 2 sides to the story. From what I've read, Agar was a very insecure man, and most likely it was overwhelming to be married to an international institution like Temple, a very young lady who was used to being pampered from an early age. On top of that, she was barely an adult and maybe still had that fantasy storybook idea of marriage. At the same time, Agar was suddenly thrust into the world of John Wayne and John Ford, tough, hard-drinking men. That, of course, doesn't justify his actions, but perhaps makes what happened a little more understandable. And I have to imagine that constantly being referred to as Mr. Shirley Temple took its toll. In fact, even after the divorce, almost every newspaper story about him for the rest of his life began with Shirley Temple's ex. But in the end, no one really knows what went on behind closed doors. The only information we have is from Shirley's point of view. And to give John Agar credit, he never, in his whole life, made his dirty laundry public. For Shirley, she later said that she had rushed into marriage because she wanted to be the one who got married first of the girls in her class at Westlake. I wanted to win the race, she explained. This is a dangerous basis for marriage. John Agar spends 29th birthday brooding. Johnny tried to get away from it all, but he can't forget his wife and baby, said Forrest Tucker. While they are in Honolulu, he is on the Bowery shedding a bitter tear. We were both pretty young and it just didn't work out, Agar explained. When we separated, I made a deal with her that we wouldn't say anything against each other. I've stuck to my word on that, and I always will. You know, you live and you learn, and I look back on that as a learning experience. I don't have any ill feelings, and I've always wished her the best. And you've got to remember that Shirley was more than a movie star. She was a national institution. I didn't have the background, nor the experience, nor the maturity to handle a marriage to her. In an interview with B-film historian Tom Weaver, Agar said, "What is personal in Shirley's life and personal in my life is nobody's business. I'm not going to tell you anything. When we separated, we made an agreement, Shirley and I, that we wouldn't say anything about each other. I kept my promise. I continue to keep it. I'm never going to say anything detrimental. That's the way it is." When asked if Shirley kept her promise, Agar responded, "She broke that agreement as soon as we went into court, but that's her problem, not mine." Even with the bad press, John continued to act.
Thanks, Captain Hale.
It's your company now, Mallory. Good luck to you.
It's going to be kind of tough following a man like you in this outfit.
Hogwash. Nobody's indispensable. Not in this army.
But if public opinion wasn't bad enough for Agar, it only got worse. John Agar arrested as drunk driver. "I've done nothing wrong," Agar said. "Sure, I've had a few drinks." He blew his top when he cited news photographers. "What do you want to do?" he complained. "Ruin my career?" John Agar makes another picture. "I could have gone back to Chicago in my family's meat packing business," he said. "It would have been much easier, playing it safe, but I knew I had the opportunity of a lifetime and I'm sticking with it." Agar to continue career as an actor. "I hope someday to become an actor," said Agar. "I'm studying dramatics and taking singing lessons. I've always wanted to sing. I like to do musicals, westerns, anything. It's up to the public and my own ability." But his reviews for his acting never seemed to be overwhelming, such as this one for Breakthrough, in which Moselle Britton Diehard wrote, "John Agar was adequate as usual." John Agar plans to make a personal appearance tour as a singer after he completes his assignment in Warner's The Travelers. He has been taking lessons for the past year and is hoping that someday he will sing in a picture. He tried to keep his film career going and start a singing career, but John just couldn't keep out of trouble. Shirley's ex-husband is held for drunk driving. Agar, if convicted, faces a 30-day jail sentence imposed last April 29th when he pleaded guilty to reckless driving in Beverly Hills. The term was suspended for 1 year. John Agar goes back to mother. John Agar, Shirley Temple's first husband, moved back home with his mother today because it's the best way he knows to keep out of trouble. "That's just one of the reasons," the square-jawed actor explained. "I think every son ought to move in with his parents every 6 months, just to get reacquainted." Bloodshot eyes? Nuts, Shirley Temple's ex says. Agar was arrested in West Los Angeles last January 13th, and traffic officers noted that he refused to take a sobriety test, but that his face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot. "Nuts," says Agar to reporters, his face flushed, his eyes bloodshot. "That's the way I always look. When I go before the cameras, I have to put drops in my eyes." Arrest John Agar again on drunk driving charges. 30 years later, John talked about his arrests in an interview with Dennis Daniel in Psychotronic Video magazine. "I was just very stupid. That says it all. I can't tell you what brought it all about. I was having some problems I've long since forgotten. I really don't like to think about those days. I'm not condemning myself of anything. I was just stupid to allow myself to get in that kind of a jam. But on May 17, 1951, John got married once again, this time to a woman who was a witness to his arrest. John Agar, actress, wed in Las Vegas. John Agar and his actress bride were honeymooning here today after their Las Vegas wedding was temporarily delayed because the marriage license clerk thought the 30-year-old was obviously intoxicated. But after Agar gulped down a half-dozen cups of black coffee and trotted around the Nevada courthouse a few times, the license was issued and he promised to love and cherish brunette Loretta Barrett Combs, 28. Maybe John learned a few lessons after the failure of his first marriage, because his marriage to Loretta lasted 49 years until her death in the year 2000. But at this time, he was still fighting his latest arrest. For his recent one, John used the golf game he played just before as proof of his sobriety. "I played my usual game," he told a municipal court jury yesterday. "It's pretty hard to get that ball in a hole if you're drunk." However, his defense didn't work and he was found guilty. And he didn't even fight his other arrest. And it all took its toll as he was released from his contract with David O. Selznick. He tested for the lead in the 20th Century Fox film I Don't Care Girl, but that didn't happen because he was sentenced to 5 months in jail. "Don't blame this on Shirley Temple," Judge Hart warned. "He's a potential killer, that's all." "What if it was your family he killed?" the judge asked Moses, his attorney Llewellyn Moses. The judge said the actor must continue medical treatment for his alcoholism after his release from jail. He recommends that Agar be sent to the city prison farm where he can get some exercise, fresh air, and possibly assist in the work there. The judge, after calling Agar a potential killer, said he was forced to sentence him to jail for the protection of society and for his own good. Pals of John Agar, who have been visiting him in the big house, report that he is a model prisoner and is determined to reduce his 180-day sentence by good behavior. And it worked because he was released after 60 days. The judge said Agar, 30, took his sentence like a man. Soon he was back to acting, signing on to be in the Republic film Minnesota, but first he was operated on for an appendicitis. "I'm through with kid stuff," the ex-husband of Shirley Temple told me. "I've made up my mind that this is what I want. A lot of things happened to me and people thought I wasn't serious about my career. Now I'm a little older, a little wiser, and this is like a new start." John Agar does his first television film today for the Unexpected series. John Agar, who just celebrated his 6-month wedding anniversary, leaves this week with Sally Forrest for Chicago to co-star in a summer stock presentation of Gramercy Ghost at the Chevy Chase Theater. John Agar, vexed over a run of bad career luck, changed movie agents. He's just been offered to do a picture in Spain. Agar to do album. John Agar is now preparing a record album of his favorite ballads of the past decade.
You'd have known who I was to start with. You wouldn't have had anything to do with me. Look, Ed, I'd like to be friends again, like we used to.
You better put on your goggles, Mr. Compton. This is liable to throw some chips.
"I've turned down a lot of pictures this last year," John said on the set of My Dad, Jr. "I want to do things that'll help me and establish me because I love this business. I want to be in it 20 or 30 years from now." John on his perfect behavior score. "You'll never see me on the front pages again, that's for sure. I've learned my lesson." But just after he said that, another drunk driving arrest, and he was back in jail. "I'm all done with liquor," John Agar vows from jail. And while he was released from prison from his parole violation, he still faced another prison sentence from his latest arrest. With all his legal troubles, his career might have been over, but there was one film producer, Hal Makelim, who decided to give Agar a chance. Makelim got him a part in producer-director Hugo Haas's film Bait. As part of the agreement, Makelim signed an agreement with Haas that he would pay any losses on the $250,000 film if Agar failed to show up for work. "My attorney said he's never seen such a contract," said Makelim. "He said, 'Are you sure you want to sign this?' I didn't hesitate to sign it. I am willing to bet $250,000 that John will never take a drink again." I was the only one in town to give John another chance. You know how people are here. Everybody's got to give him a kick. Apparently, Hugo Haas even hired a dry nurse to watch over Agar 24 hours a day.
Where shall I put the bacon?
Who cares about the bacon? Gee, I'm glad to see you, Peggy.
What got into you?
Guess.
Yeah, I guess any girl would do.
Well, don't say that. Say, how about a glass of wine?
John Agar actor. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drunkard. I never have been. I've made a couple of mistakes, he admitted, and I've paid for them. Now I want to forget them. He spoke frankly about his past problems and future hopes. Does he drink now? No, he replied, and I don't miss it at all. He attends regular meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous in accordance with the court order. Agar indicated that he was never more than a social drinker, although he has gone overboard on some well-publicized occasions. John Agar's career gets a big boost via his swashbuckling in The Golden Mistress, first film ever made in Haiti.
Lots of things.
We'll pretend that didn't happen.
Why? It was fun.
Producer Hal Makelim, who stood by John Agar during all his troubles, has come to a parting of the ways with Agar. And I'm curious why. Big build-up due for John Agar under new contract with UI. John went through a very bad period when he was unhappy, drinking too much and unable to get work. His mother stuck by him. So did his present wife, with whom he is very happy. Now John has signed on a 7-year contract and he'll have a featured role in Smoke Signal starring Dana Andrews. It is the intention of producer Ed Mull to give him a big build-up. John has a good singing voice and he photographs extremely well. John Agar, just back from a personal appearance tour, is off to New York too to audition for a Broadway musical. And finally, that last drunk driving charge from a year earlier went to trial and he was fined $200 and placed on 2 years probation. It has been 2 years since John Agar received a photo of their daughter from Shirley Temple Black. John Agar cuts his first commercial record for Decca this week. The John Agars are moving into a house in San Fernando Valley. Here they are planning to adopt a child. Had a telephone call from John Agar who asked me if he and his wife, Loretta, could stop by and show me their month-old boy whom they adopted. We're calling him Martin David, said John, and we're very happy about him because we've talked a long time about adopting a baby. John, who was formerly married to Shirley Temple, and as a young boy who was in numerous scrapes and had a lot of unpleasant publicity, works hard now, is happily married, and has turned out to be a great credit to our industry. For United Artists, Agar would make such films as Tarantula and The Mole People, but it soon became apparent that all they wanted him to do was science fiction type pictures. So he decided to leave and become an independent actor. However, his first role after leaving the studio wasn't much different. Maybe I made a big mistake leaving Universal, I don't know, Agar mused. The whole reason I left was because I felt limited, so I went out on my own and started to freelance. I certainly made more money that way, but you know what was the first picture I did after I left Universal? The Daughter of Dr. Jekyll. So I went right back to the same kind of thing I was making at Universal. The reason why I went ahead and did that was simple. I had to make a living, and that's what was being offered to me at the time. I didn't have much of a choice. John Agar continued to act and sing for most of his life. He made all types of films, but it was his low-budget horror films that he is best remembered.
You were fortunate that Gore, one of the greatest intellects in a world where intelligence is all, has chosen to use your body. Through me, you shall have powers such as no man has ever seen before in the history of your planet. The power of pure intellect.
It's all right. He'll be back for another load in a minute.
were a few more brushes with the law, including at least one more drunk driving arrest. If you're wondering whatever happened to John Agar, Shirley Temple's first husband, during or before the recent actors' strike, or even after, the former actor has been busy as a writer. John has just finished co-writing the pilot script for a proposed new series called Patton the Magician. Besides his acting, John became a very respectable golfer, winning many celebrity golf tournaments. But by the early 1960s, he seemed to be interested in more than acting. Agar said he recently did a horrible play that was successful in small towns called Pajama Tops. He added that he has a few other acting things in the offering, but he is seriously considering going into non-entertainment business. This, he said, doesn't mean I want to stay out of show business, I just want an outside interest. This ad was for a business opportunity. It was for John Agar's Pink Lady Cotton Candy. I was wondering if this was our John Agar. After all, there are quite a few people in the world with that name. That was answered in Luella Parsons' column. She wrote, "Give me a start the other day to read John Agar's name on the financial page of the newspaper. Remember him as the young actor who married Shirley Temple and whose subsequent divorce from the dimple to darling got us all shook up? Well, John is a blooming tycoon now as the owner of a chain of cotton candy machines throughout Los Angeles, which are literally coining money." By the 1970s, John had become drinking buddies with writer-director Edward D. Wood Jr. In fact, he was at Ed Wood's when reports came over the television that he had died. It was ABC. That's a true story. Ed said, "You're not dead, I'm gonna tell him. Forget it, I don't care what they say." Well, Ed called up the television station and said that I hadn't died, that I was sitting right here with him. And I went in the next day and they put me on the air. By the late 80s, many people were wondering about John. I would like to know if John Agar is alive or dead. If he's deceased, when did he die? Jeannie Morris, La Honda, California. Question, I say John Agar is dead. My sister says no. John Agar was still alive in 1990, occasionally acting and appearing in public as an actor or a singer. And this is where this documentary ends. John's last film was for Ted Newsom's 2005 low-budget comic film, a tribute to the 1950s B-movies called The Naked Monster, which featured many of the actors from those B films.
An egg? Dr. Ferguson, you mean?
Yes. Your monster is a mother. A big, mean, ugly mother.
John Agar passed away at the age of 81 on April 7, 2002 in Burbank, California, from severe complications from emphysema. He had been confined for months to an iron lung. And of course, he was still referred to as Temple's ex. Many of those who acted with John mentioned in interviews how wonderful and helpful he was to work with. He never seemed to pretend he was more than what he was. Agar embraced his cult status in science fiction and B-movies with good humor, often attending fan conventions. But this was after he wrestled with personal struggles, the weight of sudden fame, and the demons of alcohol. And unfortunately, those with demons often hurt those around them. Happily, both Temple and Agar went on to live pretty good lives, each finding a partner to share their later years. Sadly, he never had any kind of relationship with his daughter from his first marriage, Linda Susan. She would be adopted by Charles Alden Black, Temple's second husband, and I assume she looked at him as a dad. John and Loretta adopted 2 children during their 49-year marriage. And he kept his word to the day he died to never say anything bad about his first wife.